Yo guys, what's up? So today I wanted to go ahead and talk about the LOAON announcement and a little bit maybe about the AGS announcement as well. So last night, if you don't know, was LOAON for summer 2025, and I actually was just gonna play Chrono Odyssey this weekend and not make a video, but to be honest, I think there's some things that we kind of need to talk about. Just a quick disclaimer, we're not going to be talking about every single thing from LOAON. There was a fair bit of information to go over, and if you want more detailed information about that kind of stuff, go check out Memo's video. He's still currently, as we speak, or as I speak right now, he's currently editing it. It looks like it's going to be quite long, so, buckle in. But there are a few things in particular that I really kind of took notice of, and I wanted to talk about, as I said already. So, brief overview is really quickly, I did not enjoy this LOAON. I was hoping for a lot more, and they just didn't deliver, I think, on hardly any fronts except for the female paladin, also known as Valkyrie now. She looks awesome. She looks really great, and I'm looking forward to playing her. KR is getting her in about 4 days from when I'm recording this. I'm not sure when the video will go out for you guys, but just know that it's pretty soon. And then we will be getting it, it looks like AGS said, in August. So we are still a fair bit behind. No Shadow dropped global release like I had hoped for, but we kind of also assumed that wasn't going to happen. So other than that, that was kind of the only really big W, to be honest, in my opinion. There were lots of things that I think aren't going the right way. So we'll just start jumping into those. So first off, we are seeing gold nerfs all the way up to and including hard mode Aegir and also normal Brel Gate 1. I'm not really sure why only Gate 1 there, but that's kind of weird. Maybe it was a mistranslation, maybe it was something weird. Also, just in general, guys, this is all like translated information, so until it's in our version of the game, like don't super panic, but just be aware that some of these things are potentially going to be happening and might not be too great. So roughly 50% of the gold coming from those activities is going to be character gold in KR. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. Maybe they're going to move it to bound gold for us. But also, we haven't gotten the previous bound gold changes or raid gold changes, so maybe we won't be getting this right away. Hopefully, we won't be getting this anytime soon. I think it's kind of doesn't really make a lot of sense personally, but I think it's also part of their incentive to get you to swipe more in the future. Although I did say that, I'm kind of not too happy about all that. On the lower end of things, it does seem like people are going to benefit from it more. So solo mode is going to give you similar to normal mode gold now. It's just also going to be like the character bound gold or whatever. So that is good. It kind of does just mean that normal mode will be dead, but it was kind of already dead for most of that content. I'm not really sure how it's gonna play out for people doing solo Aegir at this point. And so if people are gonna do solo versus normal Aegir, I mean normal Aegir would just be dead, I assume. And we'll have to see how that plays out. But yeah, it kind of does look like all the content up until 1670 is kind of dead now. So we'll have to see. I don't think that's too good for the game personally, and I think that that really doesn't help with getting players back into the game because it just extends the point at which they can no longer find people. So now when new players and returning players come back to the game, they will no longer be partnering or grouping with anybody until they get to 1670. And as you might have guessed, they didn't nerf any of the honing. One more thing I want to mention is the Mokoko Express. Bum ba bum. And like I said, they didn't actually nerf honing or any of that. So with female paladin, we'll be getting a 1580 pass. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. 1580 to 1660 event for female paladin, which at this point they're pushing 1620, 16 or sorry, 1720, 1730. So roughly 100 item levels, behind. I don't know, man. I don't know. Like it's laughable how bad it is. I was taking bets with a friend of mine before or like during LOAON. I was like, surely we get a 1640 pass, right? Surely get like a 1640 to 1680 event or something. And nope, we get a 1580 pass in 2025 summer. Yikes. So that's right. They didn't nerf any of the honing, and they are worried about nerfing any of the honing, even at the lower levels, anytime soon, because they're worried about the pioneer or whale investment of assets. And that was a recurring theme in last night's LOAON. It was even asked about a few times in the Q&A. Why it wasn't Smilegate respecting their assets. As you know, that's not something that makes any sense at all if you think logically for 2 seconds. So it's not something that I'm very happy to hear. It also did result in a rather funny meme. I'll just go ahead and post on the screen for you guys. So Lambark made a post saying that after the QA hold during the LOAON, this is my view of the director, and it's just picture of the LOA director licking the whale's feet. And that's kind of pretty accurate, to be honest, from what the rest of this LOAON had. But yeah, we'll keep getting into it. Since we're on the topic of whales, might as well go over the other whale contents that are going to be coming out. So there will be a first difficulty of the Kazeros raid. The Kazeros raid will be split into 2 raids. The first one will be open to everyone with normal and hard and stuff, just like normal. And then the second one will only have the first difficulty. And until that is cleared, no one will be able to do the normal or hard mode versions of that raid. Personally, I don't like this. I think it's cool what they're trying to do. I think if they had done the opposite, I think if they had done like a first mode difficulty of the first raid and then the second raid doesn't open until somebody cleared the first one and everyone gets access to it at the same time, I think something like that would have been a lot better. This is really to incentivize the like race to world first. And as you guys know, or as you guys can probably imagine, you're not taking part in that unless you're a whale. You're just not. There's no free to play. I can't even imagine Dolphins, especially in KR when they have, a lot of teams that every team has an Esther weapon and stuff like that. You're not going to be a Dolphin or a low spender or a free to play trying to go for the world first. You're just not going to. And, you might go in and mess around in the world or the first mode, but you don't have any actual shot of clearing it, which is going to be a bummer for a lot of players. So I would have preferred if they had done a, something like I said, where they clear the first difficulty on the first raid, and then suddenly the second raid opens up in all of its difficulties for everybody across the board. But instead, they're going with this to try and incentivize those whales, those pioneers, to continue spending and try and be part of this world's first race event. As you might have guessed, there also is going to be world's first race rewards. So they're going to be getting a cool like animated title and some other stuff. You can go ahead and check out Memo's video. I imagine it will probably have all of that information as well. There's also going to be something called After Rankings. So After Rankings is a speed run leaderboard, which, as you can imagine, is just going to be RMTers, bussers, and whales. Just like normal, right? Like there's yeah, it's just gonna be what it's gonna be. You're not gonna interact with that system. You're not gonna get the rewards, for being a regular player. It's just at the end of the day, it's just more content for the people at the high end. Which I want to be extra, extra clear here. I'm not against having content that is designed for whales. There just also needs to be other stuff, and as you'll see, there isn't really other stuff. Like other players, more casual players, get access to basically the same thing as everyone else. And I'm hoping that Paradise will change this. Hopefully, we'll have to see. I think he specifically mentioned it. The director mentioned the casual, like, kind of atmosphere of Paradise and kind of seeing that as more casual content. But again, he didn't give any information. We know hardly anything about Paradise and what's actually going to be like. So, I guess we just hold out hope. We did see that we are getting Paradise, I believe, actually in the West next month. I believe that's what AGS said. in their letter, which is kind of a little weird because they're apparently not getting it until like September or August or something in KR. So that's kind of interesting that we're getting it before them. But yeah, the a lot of this content, a lot of this low on was very focused at those pioneer players, those whale players that feel the need to be extra respected. So, with that, we are going to be getting something called the honor system. Now, they didn't really go into a ton of information. I'll try and include a picture on here for you guys as well. But they did show off a title that you gain for having this honor, or quote unquote, whatever. We don't know a whole lot about it. We do know it might be tied to the system where essentially, like I'd mentioned previously in a different video, with Crystal of Atlan, you can give likes to people. It sounds like you'll be able to upvote maybe a single person, or we'll have to wait and see um, after you complete a piece of content. Now, the thing about this, and the reason why I don't like this versus the Crystal of Atlan implementation, is because to me, this just screams that you're going to upvote the people on the MVP board. If you do a raid, you're probably going to upvote the Cruel Fighter damage dealer, or you're probably going to update or upvote the Radiant support. You're not going to upvote the person that maybe did a crucial counter or something like that, right? It will always end up being the whoever did the most. So naturally, again, this kind of just goes back into whales, right? Like this is not exactly like whale or pioneer content, but in a way, it kind of is. I think, and I think that most of the time, what will happen is you'll do a piece of content. Let's say you do a guardian raid with somebody who's juiced out of their mind. They're gonna kill the guardian, do cruel fighter, 40% or whatever, and then people are just gonna naturally like click upvote. That's that's how these systems work, especially when you're only limited to one upvote. Now we'll have to wait and see if you're getting multiple upvotes or not. But even then, in a raid, there's only 4 people on an MVP screen, so most likely you're just gonna upvote, 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 and then move on, right? I think hardly ever are people gonna go out of their way to not upvote people that aren't on the MVP screen, which is part of the reason why I think this is a bad implementation. The reason why Crystal of Atlan does this better is because there's no limit on the number of likes that you can give. You can give full likes to everybody. And so, if there's some kind of way that you can do that in Lost Ark as well, I'll be a little more okay with it. But just because of the nature of having the MVP screen, it just naturally isn't going to play out like that. People are always going to be biased to just pick whoever's on the MVP screen. Another thing I wanted to mention too was this honor system and these titles. I mean, I'm not sure how exactly that's going to all play out. The titles from these have different buffs that they give to your whole party. Now, if there are ways to get them that are more than just being on the MVP screen, it's more than just, purchasing it. Like, I don't know, if there's a mokoko one, right? You're helping out enough mokokos, and so you get like a party buff that helps the mokokos or something. I think that stuff like that would be really good if it's achievable by normal players. The problem comes in when they're not achievable by normal players, or if they're purchasable. And let me tell you, if you look at the screen right now, I'll go ahead and put it up. There is a title that looks an awful lot like it has the Esther like kind of look of it, right? The blue coloring around it. Maybe I'll put up an Esther weapon so you guys can see kind of for reference what I'm talking about too. But the point being is that I worry that there are going to be titles like this where, you know, they maybe aren't buying Esther weapon stuff right now. And so they're like, okay, what's another way to milk the player base? Esther titles. So we'll have to see. Hopefully that's not a thing, but it's Smilegate, and they have shown that they are very much catering towards their pioneer player base right now. So we'll have to wait and see. Okay, and then we have the combat power indicator. So I have tried to talk to a lot of people about this before. There's a problem with this, and this is something that we've actually seen in other MMOs. If you've ever played other MMOs, you probably run into this problem. So something that will happen, and like let's say WoW is always a good example because a lot of people have played World of Warcraft. But in WoW, when you move from one tier set to another, you usually end up moving because the item level is higher. But oftentimes what will happen is you'll get drops from the new tier set and you'll put them on. Maybe you'll get like a 2-piece bonus, but then you'll keep older gear that's lower item level that has less stats on it, specifically because things like the 2-set bonus is better for you than increasing just the raw stats that you gain until you get that 4-piece for your new set. This can, I think, be the same exact problem that we may end up seeing in Lost Ark. A great example might be, let's say somebody's already crit capped. I run a crit capped Slayer as my main, crit capped Predator Slayer, and is this combat system smart enough to know that I'm already going to be at max crit, or if I put on a crit rate ring, is it going to give me more combat power? I don't think that they're not. I don't think they're gonna have the nuance to look at it and be able to actually understand what actual combat power means. I think what they're going to do, because this is how everybody seems to do it when they first, you know, build a system like this, is higher number means number goes up. And what that will mean is that people with random high rolls on their accessories are going to get more power, and they're artificially going to be able to increase their combat power rating. And people just aren't going to understand why. They're not going to look into the nuance. They're going to see the combat power rating and then be like, well, why does this guy do no damage? Realizing that he has, you know, high rolled recovery stat instead of weapon power on his earrings, for example, right? I think there's just going to be a lot of stuff like that that they don't take into consideration. If they do, you know, more power to them. But I don't think it'll be possible because a lot of classes have different niche scenarios. Example being my main, right? Predator Slayer. When I activate my burst, I get an extra 30% crit. Now, are they going to be able to take into consideration that 30%? Cool if they do, but also are they going to take into consideration that I'm going to be back attacking and then I'm going to use crit rate from that as well? So it's actually 40% that I'm going to gain. So, like, instead of looking at me and being like, well, I only have 60%, so an extra 5% crit would be really good, not realizing that I'm over capped, right? I don't think that they're going to be that nuanced. And so, unfortunately, this is going to end up being, I think, an not helpful system. Okay, so now we got that kind of stuff out of the way. They also said they are going to be releasing Extreme Thaemine, which could be very fun, although they specifically said it would be easier than Extreme Vaulton. So I'm not really sure why that is, but actually I personally would be really happy to go back and do Thaemine. It happens to be probably like my number 2 raid so far of Lost Ark. And so, yeah, going back and experiencing that will be cool. Hopefully, it'll be something that we can rotate in and out of our weekly raids or something. What I've always kind of wanted them to do with these different extreme modes is have them rotate on like a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So maybe this week we have Thaemine, and next week we have Vaulton, and the week after maybe we have Vicus or something like that, right? Like, it would be cool to have something like that that you can mix and match with your raids. So you're not always just doing the same 3 raids again and again and again and again. And yeah, I honestly, it gets pretty old. I feel like running the same 3 raids. Like, if I could switch Aegir out on all my characters, I would in a heartbeat. Like, you cannot believe. I hate that raid. It is not fun to play. And so having an alternative, if there is a raid that you just don't like, being able to run one of those older, more fun raids, I think would be a great thing. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the situation regarding the mercenary system. So they did mention it. However, I had very conflicting information here. And so I'm not entirely sure which one's which. So Memo said very specifically that the director said that they might be looking into it in the future, and that's something that they're playing with. And then I think Wine Blue in his video with like Stoops and saying stuff like that, or in his live stream, said that it was coming. So there are certain content creators like Stoops and saying like that that seemed to believe, at least when I went to sleep last night, that um the mercenary system was coming. However, later on in the Q&A, it was then asked more about the mercenary system, And the director said that they were still thinking that they might do the idea, and that maybe after Kazeros, that they might add a raid kind of like, with this in mind, with the mercenary system in place. So it kind of sounded to me like maybe it's coming, but it's not for sure, and it wouldn't be anytime soon because it wouldn't be until after Kazeros. So I'm not really sure where we ultimately are going to land on this. Like I said, the translation was really weird. I don't understand how you can have two people interpret the Korean language in two vastly different ways, because they seem to be very conflicting. One is like a positive, yes, it is, and the other is like a negative, maybe it's not, or maybe it is. So maybe there's some nuance there I don't really understand. But either way, we may or may not be getting this system in the future. I also, as I previously said in a different video, my last video, I think, this kind of thing isn't actually as cool as it sounds, in my opinion. This is something that they have to be very careful with, and if it's done correctly, it could be okay. So, for example, I was talking with a friends and stuff like that, and someone that we run guild stuff with and raids with and stuff, and he brought up the good point that like sometimes on his alt characters that he'll have like a DPS full lobby and they're just waiting on two supports. Now, if you could bring in two mercenary supports to just fill those last two slots, that could be really valuable. The problem with this is that the mercenary system, at least on the mobile version where all of this is coming from, was designed in a way where it would give you, you could raid with 1 to 8 players in your group and then mercenaries would fill for you. So you could potentially have 7 players in your lobby as mercenaries. So if they don't have any kind of limitations on this, where you can only use a certain number of mercenaries, it's really going to encourage players to not have to group. That's what this is going to do. And so I think that, to be honest, like, I just don't like mercenaries filling in spots for players. What they should be doing is they should be getting players to the point where they don't have to worry so much about the number of people, and dividing your player base up the way that it currently is by honing and different item levels and stuff like that just hurts the game more and more. But the thing is that there will surely come a time, if you can fill with bots, where you say, I could gamble on this random person in the queue, or I could just pick up a bot and I already know what the bot's going to give me. Now, hopefully they tweak it in a way where it's not too good, but what constitutes as too good? So, for example, some of my support players that I play with on a regular basis will have 95, 95 or higher on both their brand and attack power. And other supports that I play with will be closer to like, these aren't just random ones I pug with, right? Sometimes they'll be closer to like 60-60, right? And so if you know that a bot is going to be 70-70, you probably just gamble and you just take that. Or you could try and get a really high roller support. However, let's say instead that they say, okay, well, average support that's pretty decent should be like 85-85. Now, are you going to gamble for a 90-90 or a 95-95, or are you going to just take the bot? To be honest, I feel like average players aren't that good, and it skews so differently. If you're good, you're really good. If you're not good, you're really bad, right? And to be honest, I could see myself taking a bot over a support that I just find in the queue because I know their performance will at least be okay. And here lies the problem, right? Like, we should not be advocating for taking bots over people. And so there needs to be some kind of restriction there. Maybe the bots need to be really bad, or just like slightly above average. Like, I don't know, but I also don't really trust Smilegate to get it right on the first iteration. I know that they, in the past, like I said, or like I always say, they seem to be the worst developers at getting things right the first time. And so I think what they'll end up doing is they'll make bots probably too powerful because they need them to be in the mobile version, right? Like, especially if you're a solo player, And so, like, realistically, if you're a solo player with 7 bots on your team, are you fighting the boss or are they fighting the boss? You know? So I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. I just have a lot of worries and I hesitate for making bots fill in for players for endgame activities. I just don't think that that's where they belong. I think the filling in for daily activities or, like mess around content, like totally fine, makes total complete sense to me. Filling it in for your guardian raids, perfect. Let's get guardian raids. They're filling there for your cubes. Oh, dude, I would take bots and cubes all day if it could guarantee that I had a support every time. Are you kidding me? Like, these kind of places are places that would be so good for this kind of mercenary system. They don't belong in endgame raids. They just don't. To clarify too, I just want to really make it clear, like, I'm not against the idea of flex raiding. And in fact, I very much want a flex raid system, but there are things that they would have to do to make it work, I think, in a good way. So one, they'd have to have a flex raid system that has a minimum number of players, like WoW does 8 to 30 players, and you can be any size in between, and that's good enough. So maybe, Lost Ark does 4 to 8 players or something like that. And I think that would be fine. And the thing about it is they have to restructure it. So maybe instead of like you have 4 to 8 players, so maybe like 5 or 6 players, but then your support would need to be able to support everyone. So they'd have to restructure how supports work, which they are sort of doing, but not going to be this. They'd have to change the way party structure would work to make that work, etc. So I do think flex rating would be a good thing, and I do hope that they add that at some point. But I don't think the mercenary system is how I personally would do the flex raid system. I think, like I said, it needs to still be players and then have supports just be more flexible, right? In how many people they could do. So instead of maybe one support or two, one support every party, maybe have one support for 7 people, you know? So I think there are ways that they could do it and make things easier, even for groups that have more of an issue finding support. And this just isn't one of them. So one cool thing, and I say cool, but we really have to wait and see, is this idea of this arc grid system. So I'll go ahead and put some images on the screen for you guys to see this. And basically, the way that it's going to work is you're going to have one main core through the power of editing. So I said it was one main core. It looks like you might be adding more in the future based on the grid of the image that I'm putting up for you guys. So just kind of keep that in mind. It might be more than what I was thinking originally. There is RNG to this, by the way. It sounds like it is a long-term pursuit, RNG pursuit. So you will be waiting until you get these random drops, and until then, you might get gatekept. You might, have a lot of damage that you're missing out on. This system is apparently going to be getting or giving you more power than when we went to Ancient Gear for Arc Passive. So should be pretty substantial power increase by getting these different things. And they have different rarities that drop as well. So again, there's one main core and then several gems. The main core comes from the endgame raids, Kazeros, for example, and then the gems come from more of your daily content. Think like Chaos Dungeon, Guardian Raid, and stuff like that. So, I'm not sure. They talked a little bit about like fatigue and like fade embers and how that helped lessen fatigue. Maybe this is kind of their idea for that. But again, they very, very heavily emphasize that this is going to be a long term pursuit. This is not going to be something that you get right away unless you get really lucky. And I worry that just like every other RNG system that's ever existed in every other video game, the people with legendaries end up being so much more powerful than everyone else. It's so annoying. And a great example, I hate to use WoW again, but when they did the legendary drop chance in Legion, do you guys remember? Were you there when people got their first legendary and started doing like 20 or 30% more damage than everyone else? Because it sounds like maybe this is going to be exactly how that happens once again. And, eventually other people got their legendaries and you'll get your cores eventually too. But until then, you're going to be vastly underperforming when we have these other systems like the honor system. If you have a core, you're probably going to be more likely to be on the MVP screen. So you're going to be more likely to get the honor title. And you have these different systems that all kind of domino effect into each other, right? You're now depending on RNG for a big chunk of your damage, and if you don't have that damage, then you're going to miss out on getting the honor probably. And if you don't have the honor, then you're going to miss out on getting the title, which gives party buffs, which makes everyone's life easier. Like, it's just a bunch of RNG on RNG on RNG. And like, this game already has a lot of RNG when it comes to honing and everything else. I'm really not sure we need more. I would like there to be some kind of pity or something at the very least, but we'll have to wait and see. For example, the example that I gave was the WoW legendaries, and there were eventually pities on that, but it took way too long to kick in. And also, there was the bug where, like, when somebody got a legendary, they were more likely to get another one. So hopefully, we don't have issues like that. But I don't really want to have to deal with that fiasco again, and it seems like that's exactly where we're going. Something I kind of forgot to add earlier was they also nerfed the gem income of tier 3 raids. And the reason for this is they looked at it and they did a comparison to see the amount of gems that were being generated in tier 4 and the amount of gems that are being generated in tier 3. Now, if you know much about this, you know that actually people are still farming tier 3 gems because when we moved to tier 4, they actually made gem acquisition slower. And that really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't actually think that nerfing the tier 3 raids was the appropriate measure. I think it makes more sense that as you would progress your character further on, you should be making more and more gems as time goes on. But again, as I have mentioned multiple times now, this was a LOAON about the pioneers, the whales. And so anything that would disrupt their value of their assets is not something that's going to be tolerated. So they will be changing the drops of the tier 3 uh, chaos dungeons and stuff like that to drop less gems and not increasing any of the gems made in tier 4. Okay, so those are kind of the big main topics that I really wanted to talk about. You know, there's lots of other little things, like there's gonna be like a loot box basically you can spend gold on. They're gonna make a bunch of gold sync systems, stuff like that. Anyway, if you want to see more of that stuff in those details, go check out Memo's video. I think this was really, really bad for LOAON. Like genuinely really bad. Like a lot of people are looking at this as like this was a massive W. We're getting some quality of lives, and in some cases that's true. Like the skins and stuff like that, there are small quality of lives that are coming, but this wasn't any big significant change for the game other than the clear prioritization of the pioneers and their investments. Um, and to me, that signals all of the wrong things. All of this signals all of the wrong things. And there's no other way to describe that other than that. I really hope that AGS can kind of come in and maybe clean up what was kind of, put over here by the director and stuff like that. It's very, very clear that the KR director views the whales right now as the group of people that he needs to cater towards. And this probably has a lot to do with the whole, meatball game or meatball like yeah, meatball game thing that happened like a month ago or whatever. And the thing is and I can't explain this enough, if you actually look at what the like new player experience is in this game or the returning player experience in this game, it's awful. There's no way you could actually objectively look at the new player experience in Lost Ark and tell me anything different. And so like the fact that they it it stresses me beyond belief and makes me just so annoyed that people truly believe this whole meatball game sentiment. And yeah, I like I said, this all signals to me all of the wrong things, and I hope that, as I mentioned previously, I hope that Amazon is able to take us off on our own path and we diverge from where the KR player base is, because this is genuinely not good for the game. I think there's lots of things in here that are very much not good for the game and are strong indicators that He's not going to make the changes that he needs to do what I believe personally to be the most important thing, and that is bringing back those players and either new players or returning players and getting them to the game where they need to be. I don't care if we have to devalue everything below 1660 or 1680 or even 1700. If we have to devalue everything below 1700, go for it. We need players. We need players. And like our problems in the West will be different than what they'll be in KR. And I fully understand that. But the thing is that we just can't survive. This game won't survive long term if they're going to take this kind of mindset where they're just prioritizing the whales, the pioneers. They need to be working on both. There needs to be content for the pioneers and there needs to be content for the not pioneers. And when you have an entire LOAON, what feels to be mostly only about the whales and the pioneers, it just doesn't feel good not being in that group of people. This guy took like, I'm not even kidding, it must have been like 2 minutes out of his entire 4 hour presentation to talk about the Paradise system, which he said would be for casual players. Like, I maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but I kid you not, it could not have been longer than 5 minutes out of the entire presentation. He just said that it would be more for casual players and then moved on. And like, I honestly couldn't believe that. I was so like in shock at the time because everything here seemed like it was whale system, whale thing. Like, you know, none of this felt good. None of it. The only thing that felt good was to me personally was Valkyrie looks great, like I said earlier. Extreme Thaemine will be fun to go back to Thaemine, but who knows what the item level is? They didn't actually tell us. I don't believe. They did tell us the item level, by the way, for the new raid. The new raid's going to be 1700 and 1720 for the first raid, and 1710 and 1730 for the second raid. I don't think that's too out of band or anything like that, so that's mostly fine. Um, and then the arc system, the arc grid system, could be cool. Could be. I really want to emphasize could be, because it could be complete dog water if we're being honest. Like, it could be complete awful system that we hate doing because it's completely RNG and there's no real pity for it, and you just gotta wait until you get your core to drop and you're gonna do Z damage until you get it. Like, who knows? But I also don't think that Smilegate is particularly good at one, balancing things, or two, making new systems work well the first time. Look at elixirs, look at transcendence, all of the systems that they add to this game kind of suck on the first attempt. And so every time they announce a new system, I always hold my breath and just hope that it's not going to be as bad as the last system. But I swear, every system pretty much in the game has been worse than the last, except for Karma. I do think Karma is an okay system, but it's also just basically honing again. So I don't really consider it a system, to be honest. It's literally just honing. You're just honing your like karma points, if that makes sense. Hopefully that does. If you've done karma, I can't imagine you would feel anything other than that anyway. But yeah, I'm not very happy about this low on, and maybe I'll feel differently, in a couple of days after I've sat with it more. Maybe I'll feel differently after some better translations come out, or maybe on July 1st when we get our roadmap, I'll be feeling a lot better from Amazon. I'm really, really hoping though, and I'm gonna try and put some feedback on the Discord for the AGS team, that we really, we need to move in our own direction. We can't keep following the KR player base if they're going to be doing stuff like this. We need changes in the game that are really good and meaningful for everyone across the board. And we do need content for the whales, but we desperately need content for everyone, not just the whales. And we need to make it so that way people can come back to the game after we get that content. Thank you guys so much. If you made it this far, please interact with the video like you normally would, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. I apologize now if any of this translation stuff was an issue, or if I'm too fired up or anything. It's just, man, I was so bummed, bro. I was genuinely so bummed, and I really was hoping, not necessarily for like big sweeping changes, but just like some stuff, right? Like even just give us some more details about like what the casual experience is going to be, or even just nerf honing to like 1640 or something. And instead we got none of that. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.